Hello again, thanks for choosing us. Now, about 5 billion Ghana cedis was paid as bribes in both the public and private sectors in 2021. That's according to the Ghana Statistical Service 2021 Ghana Integrity of Public Services Survey. The amount was realized from more than 17.4 million transactions. The report indicates that 26.7% of public sector officials were engaged in acts of corruption, with 9.1% being the private sector officials. Here's government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim speaking at the launch of the report.
10.3% of our population, of our citizens, the adult population, were offered money ahead of the elections, and they did indicate that 4.2% of them indicated that another family member was offered money for the same. How is this affecting our economy? We quantified it, and it's 5 billion Ghana cedis in the year 2021. What are the next steps? Your Lordship, we hope to collaborate with UNODC, TRAJ, and all the anti-corruption agencies that are in this room and are joining virtually or were not able to join, to have stakeholder engagement, do detailed engagement with the numbers that I've shared, looking at the relationships to nail down the issue of corruption at both the national and the subnational level.
Well, the report also indicates that people aged 25 and 34 are the age group most likely to pay bribes. So which public officials are taking the bribes and in what sectors of the economy? We have a breakdown of the report for you. And so as you can find there, prevalence of bribery total and by level of urbanization in 2021, we have a total of 83.8%. And 86.1 of that in urban areas, 80.3 in rural areas. So there's just a slight difference in the percentages as far as the figures are concerned for rural and urban when it comes to bribery and the adult population that engage in this. So the next slide, we'll talk about another breakdown. This is the regional breakdown of the figures, the prevalence of bribery by region in the year 2021, according to this research. And so the deepened areas, you're looking at the Western, the Greater Accra, the Western North Ahafo, Brong Ahafo, and also the Northeast are the most prevalent when it comes to bribery, followed by areas like the Central region, the Northern region, and the Upper East region, where you are seeing between 28 and 30%. Then you can look at areas like the Ashanti region, the Eastern region, the Volta and Oti, as well as the Upper West region, constituting between 19 and 28%. The least prevalent as far as the regional breakdown is concerned for bribery in 2021, we are looking at the Savannah and the Bono East region. So this is the regional breakdown for you. Now let's look at the age distribution as well. So people aged between 25 and 34 are the age group most likely to be paying bribes. And this according to the UNODC research. So you can see that between 25 and 34, you have 29.9%. That is followed by the age group between 35 and 49. Then you can look at 50 to 64. You can come to 18 to 24, giving you 23.9%. And then age 65 and above, 17.6%. They are the least in terms of the age distribution when it comes to persons who are likely to engage in bribery. Now, this breakdown also looks at people with the highest level of education. So what's the relationship between education and bribery? Now, the research finds that the more people are educated, the more likely they are to engage in bribery, either to give or receive. And so you look at, by the survey that was done, 40.6% tertiary education, post-secondary non-tertiary education, you have 27.4%. For secondary education, you are looking at 27.4%, primary education, 24.2%, and for non-formal education, you are looking at 23.3%. So the more people are educated, the more likely they are to engage in corruption. The next slide talks about the average number of bribes paid for 2021. So this one talks about the count. Okay, so 17.4 16.4 million bribes were paid in 2021. And these transactions is what gives you the about 5 billion that the government statistician spoke about. So 17.4 million bribes were taken alone in 2021. Let's look at the next slide. Now, this will give you prevalence of bribery in the private sector, the overall and by level of urbanization. So you're looking at Ghana in the urban sector, 8.4%, and in the rural areas, we're looking at 10.9%. So this is what the picture looks like when it comes to urban and rural bribery. It means that there's more bribery, according to this research, in the rural areas as compared to the urban areas. Let's look at the next slide. Now, this gives you also the prevalence in the private sector. Often when we talk about bribery, you think of the public sector, but there's also bribery in the private sector. And this chart gives us the regional breakdown. So in the Greater Accra region, in the private sector, you have more bribery, 59.1%. Then you can look at the Western region, 50%. The Western North follows with 45%. The Ashanti region is next with 44.5%. The Ahafo region follows with 43.8%. Then the Eastern region, the Bono region, the Central region, it goes all the way down to the Upper West region, where you have the least, that's 11.2%. Mind you, this is the private sector. We are talking about the private sector when it comes to corruption. And that's the regional breakdown for you. This slide gives you, so the question is, who are those taking the bribes? 50 billion paid in bribe in 2021. But who are the officials, the public officials first taking the bribes? And so you look at doctors, nurses, and midwives, separated in this. And the research looked at the contact rate. So the people who were surveyed in this research say they come into contact more with doctors, nurses, and midwives. So that is how come you have this category of public officials leading in the chart. But the subsequent slide will show you where the prevalence is, and also when it comes to cash taking, which groups are leading. So there you have it. The Lands Commission leads when it comes to taking cash, because bribery in this research was also classified into different groups, cash and kind. So there were certain categories of people who took bribes in different forms other than cash. When you're talking about cash bribes, the Lands Commission is leading, and the average they came up with is 1,669. Then you have prosecutors, judges, or magistrates taking an average of 1,208. You can talk about the Immigration Service. They follow with 950. Elected local government representatives, 585. MMDAs, GRA, customs officers, passport agency, teachers, lecturers, professors, 360. When it comes to cash, it goes all the way down. The Driver Vehicle Licensing Authority, 222. And that's quite interesting because in the past, you've seen the DVLA come quite tops when it comes to bribery and especially in cash bribes. But perhaps you could link this to digitization and some other initiatives introduced in that sector. The police officers comes low here when it comes to cash bribes. So you are seeing 220, way low there. But in terms of the prevalence, they are up there because the research suggests that they are taking bribes in other forms other than cash. And then the least you see here is health officers in other public sectors or public hospitals. So this is what I was talking about. You have prevalence of bribery in relation to 6 types of private sector employees. So, okay, this is the private sector. In the private sector, the research says teachers, lecturers in private schools are taking, more bribes. That constitutes 9.6%. You have doctors, nurses, and midwives in private hospitals, 7.6%. Private security guards, that's quite interesting. Private security guards are also in the lead, 7.3%. Insurance companies, employees, other business employees, and banking sector. Now, they limited to these because those were the names, the professions that came up in the survey with the people that were engaged as far as this research is concerned. Let's look at the next slide. And this is the gender dynamics when it comes to bribe taking. So you have public officials. It says that the share of male public officials who solicit or take a bribe when interacting with a citizen is roughly twice that of male public officials. So we have 25.2 for male public officials and 13.1 for female public officials. So that's it from the research. You have more on myjoyonline.com. You can go on there and read details of this research conducted by the UNODC in collaboration with the Ghana Statistical Service, as well as the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. Well, the judiciary has been reacting to these findings. Justice of the Supreme Court, Yoni Kulendi, says this, if not checked, corruption and the perception of it will undermine democracy and further weaken national security.
Fail to prevail in our fight against corruption. It is fast draining the public purse, it's creating barriers to economic development, decreasing effectiveness and efficiency of public services, increasing transactional costs, undermining equity and fairness in our society, making nonsense of due process and law, eroding the legitimacy of government, and will ultimately bring down our democracy and upset our national security. History will and ought to judge us harshly if we were to bequeath such a future to our children and posterity. That said, I must also say that in Ghana, the word corruption appears to be a word that is often being used without a clear understanding of the nuances involved. Allegations and counter-allegations bordering on corruption have often bedeviled our airwaves and public discourse, and I believe this fuels the perception of corruption in Ghana. I think the National Corruption Survey that is about to be launched today is a verifiable attempt to give stakeholders and the public, for the first time, some scientific basis to validate perceptions on the prevalence or otherwise of corruption in Ghana and some of the sectors that are captured in the survey. Ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that the formulation and adaptation of the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan as a comprehensive strategy was informed principally by the need to expose and combat corruption and to make it a low-gain and high-risk activity. This, of course, would enhance professionalism, effectiveness, integrity, accountability, transparency, etc., in all aspects of our endeavor to build a Ghana that gives hope to our people.
Let's do some more on this. Adam Senano is co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. He joins us via Zoom. Mr. Senano, I'm grateful for your time. Now, this is the biggest in terms of figures, monetary figures, and also the respondents we've seen so far in corruption surveys, or in any corruption survey in a particular year. And I know you've been engaged in similar work in the past. Why is this not getting any better?
Well, it's not getting any better because in the past we have not robustly dealt with the incidences that have occurred. It's a matter of perception and reality. If the perception is that people get away with buying and selling, whether it's votes, whether it's bribing, and what have you, people continue to do it because they think that's a lifestyle and there is nothing that prevents you from doing it. You don't get jailed, you don't get sanctioned. So we have not dealt robustly with the issue of corruption and graft in this country. Mm-hmm. And until we begin to set the precedent where you can see 10 people jailed, 5 people sanctioned, monies retrieved, properties, people will think that, well, this is just what it has to be. That's the norm.
Mm. And I want us to separate the judiciary and the police, for instance, because they are in the justice delivery system. You see the police leading and you see the judiciary at number 4 when it comes to cash, when it comes to the prevalence, I beg your pardon, of bribery. These are institutions that are supposed to be delivering justice. Now, if such institutions, despite all the efforts that have been made, are not making improvements when it comes to justice delivery, then that, when it comes to corruption, that must be a problem. What do you make of the electronic system that was supposed to have introduced to help improve the transparency and make things better? Do you think that has worked?
Well, so far it does not appear to have worked, but clearly across the length and breadth of the world, for that matter, electronic systems are one of the ways of cutting out the middleman, middlewoman, and all the underhand dealings that come on. And so, yes, it's a known, tested, and scientifically reported on approach to cutting down on corruption, because then there is a trail. There's a trail of who paid, who received, how much was involved, etc. And the interface between human beings is cut out so that then I am not compelled to give or to receive. So it's probably something we just need to keep at and try and digitize and make much more electronic, a lot more systems. When people are fighting the digitization or making electronic systems, there's something they're trying to hide, because actually it makes it easier, it's more convenient, and it's the way to go. So it is one of the approaches that will contribute towards this fight.
Recently, the issue of the underfunding of graft institutions in the country became very topical, especially when we discovered that the Office of Special Prosecutor, for instance, had not been adequately resourced to do his work. Going forward, is that something that we must pay particular attention to? And how do you suggest we do that if that is a major concern?
It is a very, very major concern. I mean, we don't have all the anti-graft agencies as proactive as, let me give credit to the current holder of the office, Mr. Kesi Ajabeng. And I like the way he picks up issues and says, look, we are interested, we'll do the investigation. And he's actually in court on some of the issues already, which shows he's getting traction. He definitely needs all the logistical and financial resources to make sure that the various cases he speaks, they can do the investigations in good time and get, the court's ruling. That to set a good example. I mean, that's what is lacking at the moment. Prosecution, sanctioning, jailing, so that people begin to understand that we can't get away with actions like this. So together with media, all of us civil society, media, continue to speak to government and say, make sure that you are funding all the anti-graft institutions, and I have a special interest in the Special Prosecutor's Office as well.
So, Mr. Senator, just finally, we may put in place all the measures, give them the funding and all of that, but some have argued that the quality of the persons we put into these offices is also crucial. It's at the heart of fighting corruption. How do we approach this? Should it be from a policy perspective, or how else should we deal with this in order to get people of very high moral fiber to occupy such offices?
Well, I think that the selection and screening processes must look at the track record in terms of integrity, apart from the issue of expertise and experience. And we should try and find out whether these are persons who have the integrity, who have demonstrated that kind of honesty that would want to be brought to bear on this, who are principled. And this discussion is probably even more important, cutting across many issues. If you see the weekend's election of officers by one of our major political parties, the fact that people were buying or selling votes, the integrity of those persons and whether those persons can constitute the next set of MPs from whom a president will have to select ministers, and the implications of that for this nation is something we should not trivialize. And so you're absolutely right. We need to be paying much more attention to the quality, the caliber, the integrity, the principles that these persons have, the values they stand for. And I don't think that anybody who paid much more, whether they call it TNT or anything else, or received, is the quality of person we want to see becoming an MP or a minister and expecting this country to become better. So it's an absolutely important issue. We need to do a lot more due diligence in the selection and screening processes for persons. And you are right, strong institutions and strong leadership is what gets us results. We need strong individuals with strong institutions to get us the results that this nation
Thank you
needs.
very much. That's Adam Senano. He's co-chairman of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption.